The water was rising fast. Daniel had 30 seconds, maybe less, before the current took her. A pregnant gorilla, alone, trapped on a crumbling bank as the floodwaters tore through the forest. Her eyes locked onto his across the rushing water, not with aggression, not with fear, with something that looked impossibly like a plea. His radio crackled, his supervisor's voice sharp and clear. "Daniel, do not engage, that is a direct order." He looked at her eyes, he looked at her belly, and he made her a promise he had no idea if he could keep. But before we continue, subscribe so you don't miss another touching story like this one, and write in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. The morning of the flood. 5:12 a.m. Daniel Osei had been a ranger in windy, impenetrable forest for 19 years, long enough to know every sound the forest made, long enough to know when it was warning him. The forest had tested him, broken him, and rebuilt him into something harder and quieter and more certain. It had given him the best moments of his life, and the worst. 5 gorillas dead at the southern boundary. A night he sat with them until sunrise because he couldn't bring himself to leave them alone. He had thought about quitting after that night. He hadn't, because someone had to stay, and this forest was his. That morning, the forest was telling him something was wrong. He knew the signs, the smell of the air, the color of the sky, the particular silence before the water came. He had radioed his team to move to higher ground and was heading back to the vehicle when he heard it. A vocalization, low, urgent, unlike anything he had heard in 19 years. He turned and ran toward it. He found her on a narrow bank where a tributary had burst its walls. Heavily pregnant. Trapped. The bank collapsing in chunks beneath her feet, the brown floodwater churning less than a meter below. She had nowhere to go. The current had already cut off her escape route on both sides. She saw him the moment he broke through the undergrowth. In 19 years, Daniel had learned to read gorilla body language the way most people read faces. Raised hair meant aggression. Direct stare meant challenge. Turning sideways meant submission. She did none of those things. She just looked at him, directly, steadily, with those dark, ancient eyes, and didn't move. His radio crackled. "Daniel, I can see your position on the GPS. Do not approach. Protocol is clear. No contact with wild gorillas. Stand down." It was Richard, his supervisor for 11 years, a good man. A man who followed the rules because the rules existed for good reasons. The safety of the rangers, the welfare of the animals, the integrity of everything they had built here. Daniel understood all of that. He looked at her belly, at the water rising beneath her, at the bank crumbling under her feet. He looked at her eyes. "I hear you, Richard," he said into the radio. Then he put it in his pocket, took off his jacket, and waded in. The current hit him like a wall, cold, fast, brutal. He went under within the first 3 steps. The cold hit him like something alive, not just temperature, but pressure, weight, the river's complete indifference to whether he survived it. He came back up gasping, grabbed a root on the bank, pulled himself forward. The water tore at his legs, his jacket, everything. Somewhere behind him he heard Richard's voice still crackling from his pocket, swallowed by the current. He reached the base of the crumbling bank. She was above him, less than 2 meters away. Her eyes never left his. He reached up. She looked at his hand for a moment that felt much longer than it was. Then she took it. The weight of her nearly pulled him back into the current. 200 pounds of pregnant gorilla, off balance, terrified, gripping his arm with a strength that would leave bruises for 2 weeks. His feet slipped. The water surged. For 1 second, one long, horrible second, he felt them both going. He drove his boots into the mud and pushed. He doesn't remember exactly how they made it to the other bank. He remembers the cold. He remembers her grip. He remembers hitting solid ground and not being able to move, lungs on fire, unable to speak, unable to think. And he remembers what he said to her, his face in the mud. "I've got you. Both of you." He didn't know yet what those words would mean. His team found him 20 minutes later. James, his closest colleague, 15 years at the reserve, crouched beside him and checked him over quickly. Cuts on both arms, a gash on his forehead from the debris. His boots were full of water. "Richard is furious," James said quietly. "I know. You could lose your job over this." Daniel looked at the gorilla, still sitting 3 meters away, still breathing hard, still not moving toward the forest. "I know," he said again. He didn't sound like a man who regretted anything. He expected her to move. That was how it always went. The animal recovers, reorients, disappears back into the trees. It was the natural order of things, and he had seen it hundreds of times. She didn't move. She just stayed there, breathing slowly, one hand pressed flat against the earth. That was when he noticed. Her breathing had changed. A low, rhythmic vocalization Daniel recognized immediately. Labor. After everything her body had just been through, the flood, the fear, the desperate grip on a stranger's arm, her body had decided it was time. "Call the vet team," Daniel said. "Now." James was already on the radio. The veterinary team was 40 minutes away. In normal conditions, manageable. After extreme physical trauma, 40 minutes was an eternity. Daniel stayed exactly where he was. He spoke quietly, low, steady, just sound, just presence. The same way he had spoken to distressed animals. "For 19 years. I am here. You are not alone." She labored for 35 minutes. Daniel watched every second of it. He watched her breathe through contractions that made her whole body tense and shake. He watched her grip the earth with both hands when the pain peaked. He watched her rest in the brief spaces between, eyes half closed, gathering herself for the next wave. He had a daughter. 18 years ago, in a hospital in Kampala, he had held his wife's hand through 17 hours of labor. He had watched her do exactly this, the same exhaustion, the same fear, the same impossible strength that women carry in their bodies like something ancient and unbreakable. He had been terrified that night. He was terrified now. He recognized what he was seeing. Not just an animal in distress. A mother doing the hardest thing a mother can do, alone, afraid, with nothing but her own body to carry her through. He kept talking. 30 minutes, 32, 34. When the infant finally came, small, dark, impossibly fragile against her massive hands, she caught it and pulled it to her chest in one motion. And then she made a sound Daniel had never heard in 19 years in the forest. Soft, low, almost like a hum. The sound a mother makes when she finally holds what she has been waiting for. Daniel stopped talking. He didn't want to interrupt it. The veterinary team arrived 8 minutes later. Dr. Sarah Kamani had worked with Wendy's gorillas for 12 years. She had attended dozens of births, treated hundreds of injuries, spent more time in this forest than she had spent anywhere else in her adult life. She stepped out of the vehicle and stopped. The gorilla was on her feet, moving toward Daniel, slowly, deliberately. The infant held against her chest with one arm. The team froze. Daniel didn't move. She stopped less than a meter away from him. And then he saw it. The infant wasn't moving, not the small, restless movement of a newborn finding its first breath. Not the instinctive curl of tiny fingers. Not the automatic rooting reflex that every newborn primate has. Nothing. Completely still. "Sarah," Daniel said quietly without turning. "The infant..." "I see it," Dr. Kamani said. Her voice was controlled. "Barely. A newborn gorilla that isn't breathing has minutes, not many." The gorilla looked down at the infant, then up at Daniel. In her eyes, and he would spend years trying to find another word for what he saw there, and never would, was something that looked exactly like fear. Not the wild fear of a threatened animal, the fear of a mother. 5 minutes. The whole world held its breath. The flood still roared 30 meters away. The forest stood completely silent around them. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. She made a sound, low, urgent, desperate, and shifted the infant slightly in her arms, as if she were trying to wake it, as if she understood that something was terribly wrong and didn't know how to fix it, as if she were asking for help. 4 minutes. "Daniel," Dr. Kamani said quietly behind him. "Carefully." 3 minutes. Daniel's hands moved before he made a conscious decision. He reached out slowly, no sudden movements, the way he had been trained for 19 years, and touched the infant's back with 2 fingers. She didn't pull away. 2 minutes. He rubbed gently, once, twice, 3 times. The infant twitched. 1 minute. A sound, barely a sound at all, came from it. Then a bigger one. Then it was breathing. She pulled it against her chest and made that sound again, that low, soft hum, and this time it didn't stop for a long time. Behind Daniel, someone on the team was crying. He didn't turn around to see who. His own eyes weren't dry either. He had told her he had both of them. He had kept his promise. They named the infant Maji, the Swahili word for water. The mother, field designation F-07. For 3 years, every ranger at the station called by a different name from that day forward. Grace. The formal review took 3 weeks. The committee ruled in his favor. Richard shook his hand afterward, briefly, without quite meeting his eyes. "Don't make a habit of it," he said. "No promises," Daniel said. That evening, he sat at the kitchen table with his daughter, 18 years old, home from her first year of university, and told her everything. The flood, the radio, the choice, the infant that didn't breathe. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "You'd do it again." Not a question. He looked at his hands, still marked from the current, still bruised from her grip. "Yes," he said, "I would." His daughter reached across the table and covered his hands with hers. Neither of them said anything else. They didn't need to. 7 months later, a camera trap at the eastern edge of Daniel's patrol route captured something. He watched the footage alone in the field station, late at night, long after everyone else had gone home. Grace walked into frame, moving easily, confidently, the way wild gorillas move when they are completely at home in their environment. No hesitation, no wariness, just the deep, unhurried certainty of an animal that belongs exactly where it is. Maji walked beside her. 7 months old, curious about everything, already beginning to explore the undergrowth with that tentative, delighted curiosity that all young things have when the world is still entirely new. Daniel watched them for a moment. They looked wild, strong, healthy, exactly as they should be. He felt something loosen in his chest that he hadn't realized had been tight. Then Grace paused. She turned and looked directly at the camera. Daniel leaned forward slightly. She stood completely still, looking at the lens. 1 second. 2. 3. And then she made a sound. Soft. Brief. Almost too quiet to register on the audio. The same low hum she had made on the bank when she first held Maji against her chest. The sound a mother makes when she finally holds what she has been waiting for. She remembered. For 3 seconds, looking at that camera, She remembered the man who had waded into the current when every rule said, "Don't," who had stayed through the night, through the labor, through the moment when everything almost went wrong, who had kept his promise. Then she turned and walked back into the forest without looking back. Maji followed her, disappearing into the green. Daniel sat staring at the frozen frame for a long time. Grace's back to the camera. Maji beside her, both of them gone. He had made her a promise in the mud, his face against the ground, not knowing what it meant. "I've got you, both of you." He had kept it. And now, watching them disappear strong and wild and free into the forest that was always meant to be their home, he understood something he hadn't that day on the bank. Keeping a promise doesn't always mean holding on. Sometimes it means knowing when to let go. Did this story touch your heart? And do you believe animals remember the people who saved them? Write yes or no in the comments below, like this video, and subscribe to our channel. Thank you so much for watching. See you in the next one. Bye.